and my name is Dr. Tanya Kafer, and welcome to a series of videos on the research process. So the goal of this first video is just to give an overall scope of this series and what we're going to do for it and why sort of we're doing it at all. So first things first, I made a couple of notes for myself because I tried to do this video without notes and it was 15 minutes long and I forgot to say my name. So I just have some notes here, so when you see me looking over to the side, it's just checking my notes to make sure I'm on track and that this isn't going to take forever. So what the idea of this series is that I'm going to bring you along on a research project from beginning to end. So I'm going to show you a project that I'm just about to start, or I've started planning a little bit, and I'll bring you along on that process, or the rest of that process. And as we go through and actually do the study, you'll see from beginning to end, warts and all, the entire research process. So there are a couple of reasons why I've chosen to do this. First, for most of you, if you're in the course route, you're working towards being good consumers of research. So what that means is you want to be able to read an education research paper and determine whether it's going to help you in your practice as a teacher or as an administrator or whatever you're doing. You want to be able to take that research and apply it. And so in order to do that, you have to be able to tell whether that research is good or not. And that's actually a really hard thing to do. And it takes a lot of practice. And in class, whether you're in my class or other people's classes, you're going to be spending a lot of time practicing that, evaluating research and critiquing research. And that's great. But one thing that's still really tough, or one thing that I've observed tends to be really tough, is figuring out the difference between research that is good but flawed and research that isn't good at all. So in other words, the difference between a limitation to the research and a fatal flaw in the research. And that's sort of a big deal because what we end up either rejecting perfectly good research that has a relatively minor flaw, and so, for example, we'll be like, well, if everything's flawed, I'm just going to do whatever I want anyway. And you hear people say that a lot with things like climate change, for example, and that's not good, actually. But then on the other hand, you also don't want to just accept all research unquestioningly, like, well, everything's flawed, so all research has problems, so I'll just believe whatever they say anyway. That's also bad. Neither of those strategies are ideal. So my idea is that, or I shouldn't say my idea, one thing that you guys probably know from your Bachelor's of Education program is that the best way oftentimes to learn something is to do it. Unfortunately, most of you, especially those of you who aren't in thesis route, aren't really going to get a chance to do a lot of research. You'll get to some proposal stages and you'll do a couple of things, but you'll never really do a project from beginning to end. And that's where you learn all those things, like the compromises you have to make being a human being researching in the world versus, huge holes that are giant red flags flashing at you. There's nothing like doing a thesis to make you understand the research process. But since you're not going to do that, and I suspect if it was required that you would do a thesis, you wouldn't have registered at all. You don't want to do that. And that's fine. You don't have to. So the idea is, how can we do it without doing it? By observing it is what we are hoping for. Sorry, you can probably hear in the background I have coffee going, and it just beeped because it's done, which we're very excited about. Okay. So that's the goal for those of you who are in the course route or portfolio route and don't ever want to do research, so that you can see a research project process and hopefully get a sense for some of the pitfalls that are a natural part of research and the ones that aren't. For the rest of you who are doing a thesis or who are interested in doing research in the future, then a lot of it is just going to be seeing how it's done from beginning to end. Now, your study probably won't be the same as my study. In fact, it would be very unusual if it was the exact same study. But what it will do is, a lot of times research tends to be a solitary process, especially for a thesis where you really have to be the only one doing it or working with your advisor to do it. So a lot of students sometimes get discouraged when they run into relatively minor problems because they have this idea that research has to be perfect, and as soon as it's not perfect, they get really discouraged with themselves and end up dropping out. Other times, students will be like super confident, and even when they're, giant flashing lights that this study is not going to work, alert, alert, they sort of plow forward without an idea. So I thought it might be helpful to see sort of an example from beginning to end. Maybe help you build confidence for those of you who are lacking confidence, or show you where to be cautious for those of you who aren't sure about that. So those are the main goals of what we're doing here. And I'm going to try and bring you with me as I puzzle through some of the problems, solutions, ideas, and goals of a research project. So the project that I'm thinking of starting is relatively small scale and simple. In fact, it'll probably be simpler than what a lot of you would be doing if you were doing master's theses. And that's okay. That's mostly so that this isn't like a 40-hour video series. And I had an idea for a relatively small scale study, and we'll talk about it as we go. Simple studies are also sometimes, they have to be really precise in order to be good because they're so simple. So I'm going to try and make my thinking as visible as possible. That's partially why I did this whole intro explaining my thinking in this regard, so that it's sort of like an open book, full disclosure kind of deal. There are going to be flaws in my research. It might even be fatally flawed. I don't know that yet because I haven't done the study. I haven't learned it yet. We'll find out together. And I think it'll really help getting a sense of the scope and investment in a project like this. So I'm going to be uploading these videos all at once, but I will be making them in real time as the process continues. So I'm going to try and give you sort of dates and times and sort of a sense of how long the whole study is taking, and how the process evolves over time. Okay. I think that's more than enough time introducing the project. And so to get a sense of the time today, let's go outside.